How many purple things can you think of? Here's a picture that gives you a few ideas. Perhaps some of you have purple clothes. I know that for some of you, purple is your school uniform colour. Perhaps some of you have got purple in your bedrooms. In Roman times, purple was seen as a very important colour worn by people who were rich. So you can see on these pictures here, we have important Roman emperors and generals who would have purple, important ladies who would wear purple, but only if you had plenty of money. Even today, purple is sometimes seen as a royal colour. This picture shows us some of our Queen's coronation robes, and you will see that the big train that she wore on her dress is purple velvet. Around 2000 years ago, when Jesus lived, and around the time the Apostle Paul lived too, purple was very difficult to come by. Clothes were not usually bright colours, and purple was very expensive to make. And the purple colouring was made from seashells. Here are some murex shells. And it was made from the snails and the shells, and it was ground up. And it took a lot of them to make a small amount of purple. And that's why only rich people could wear purple clothes. Paul meets Lydia in Philippi. This is the Apostle Paul. He lived just after the time of Jesus. He never met Jesus, but he became a Christian. And Paul would spend the rest of his life travelling about telling others how they too could become Christians and followers of Jesus. Paul went on some journeys. Sometimes he would walk, sometimes he would ride on horseback, sometimes he would go on boats. And in today's story, Paul travelled to the town of Philippi. You can see it here on the map. And Philippi is a part of the country of Greece. And so this is one of Paul's journeys, travelling around telling others all about Jesus. Paul and a friend, Silas, arrived in Philippi. This would be the first town in Europe that they had visited. They explored the city for a few days. It had a busy marketplace, a library, a theatre, and temples to false gods. Philippi only had a few Jewish inhabitants, people who already worshipped God. The rest were not Jews. Paul heard that a group of ladies met each day by a river outside of the city wall. They met to pray to God. One of the women at the meeting was called Lydia. She was from a town called Thyatira, and she bought and sold purple cloth. Purple and blue and red dyes were very expensive, and only rich people could afford clothes in these colours. Paul was able to teach these ladies about the scriptures and about how Jesus, God's Son, was the Saviour. They'd never heard this teaching before. Lydia already worshipped God, and she listened very carefully to what Paul was saying. The Lord opened her heart to understand and believe in Jesus for herself. Lydia and all of those in her household decided to be baptized to show that they were following Jesus and were beginning a new life as Christians. Lydia invited Paul and Silas to stay at her house all the time that they were in Philippi, to give them more opportunities to speak to people about Jesus. Lydia's home became a meeting place for the first Christians in Philippi. Lydia later supported Paul and his friends financially as they made other journeys. She was a successful businesswoman who put God first in her life. So what can we learn from the story of Lydia? Well, firstly, we know that Lydia was an important lady. She was quite rich, she was a businesswoman, and everybody thought that she was pretty important in their community. So does that mean that God only likes rich and important people? Well, no, of course that's not true. And in the Bible, we read how Jesus met all kinds of people, and then we've learnt how Paul met different kinds of people too. And in that same chapter in the Bible that tells us about Lydia, we read how Paul met a girl who was a slave, who was not important at all, who was not rich. She was very poor and nobody thought very much about her, but she was very important and became a Christian too. And then Paul also met a jailer, somebody who was in charge of the prison. And he wouldn't be rich either. He was just doing a job that people didn't really like. But he too became a Christian. And so we discover that all kinds of people can be followers of Jesus. All kinds of people can be Christians, and that's true today. People from all over the world, whether they're rich or poor, important, not important, old or young, all kinds of people can become Christians and followers of Jesus. We also learnt that Lydia was a very generous lady. She had lots of money, but she was willing to give and to share with others. She welcomed people into her house. She spent time with people. She gave people gifts. And so she was very generous and caring. We know too that she welcomed people into her house. Perhaps she had quite a big house, and she let people use it to meet in and to stay in. And we know too that she passed on the message about Jesus to others that she met. So we can learn from Lydia that everybody is important to Jesus, and that people who love and trust Jesus, who are Christians, want to share that good news with others. They want to be generous, they want to be kind, they want to be welcoming. So Lydia is a really good example of how Christians can behave today. So thank you for listening to these assemblies in the Rainbow series, and I will see you again next week when we will start something different. So thank you and have a good week. Goodbye.